I relate to you not being good at self-promoting as a neurodivergent woman from a foreign working class background, but, and please don't take this wrong, how does one get in the position you have to have the connections you have in the career you do? Oh man, the imposter syndrome I feel just hearing that question, but in true working class style, let me tell you a story and then I'll get to the answer. When I was in undergrad, one of the advisors I had was meeting with me in my first semester to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And I was like, I just left a very small town. This is all very overwhelming. And I had to take a foreign language credit. And I was like, I feel like I'm supposed to take Mandarin or something because I know that's like the language of business that we're expecting. But I really love like Spanish. And that doesn't seem as marketable, especially in Florida, right? Where it's like everybody knows Spanish. And she said to me, she was like, it depends on what you want to do. Don't do something because people are telling you it's in demand. Do it because it aligns with your goal. She was like, for example, I'm learning Italian. Where are you going to speak Italian outside of Italy? Not many places. But my goal is to one day own a vineyard in Italy. So for me, it makes sense. And I had never met a woman who had like that specific of a seemingly outrageous dream. Coming from rural America, I hadn't met many women who weren't a stay-at-home mom, nurse, or a teacher. And I wish I could tell you that I took her advice then. It was always in the back of my head, but I don't think it fully cemented for me until 2 years ago. But I tell you this because something with neurodivergence, with particularly autism and ADHD, is we can hyperfixate, right? And something I've learned about myself is to use my hyperfixation to really succeed at something. Because I was initially a journalism major, and I learned quickly that if it was not something I cared to write and report on, that I did not care. And that's why I ended up going into like a PhD in psychology and very specialized in like everything I write about, I care about. I have a strong work ethic. I'll do it to survive, but the day drags on if I am not stimulated. And I've learned that about myself. And like the autism stereotype is to be like fixated on trains, right? For me, my trains are the unwritten rules of work. I research the unwritten rules of work. I'm obsessed with it. I enjoy it. And giving into that and fueling that has helped me build a portfolio that I didn't know how I was going to use it one day, besides just it was my dissertation and I needed to graduate. But when the opportunities came, I had a portfolio that was ready to go. So my first recommendation would be whatever your fixation is, find a short-term goal to make it useful and keep working on it. I'm not saying, do what you want to do and the money will follow. Not necessarily, but like start tinkering with it to find a path forward. And then the second thing is to find your medium. I learned very quickly in grad school that I hated academic writing. I'd loved writing my whole life, but academic writing was stifling. I have publicly shit on academic writing in a book chapter in an academic book talking about how much of a barrier it is and how much it's bullshit because nobody tells you what it is. And so for me, as a spiteful person, and working class cultures have more oral storytelling where I felt like I had an opportunity to talk about my unwritten rules. My train stereotype was when I was giving presentations, whether that was when I was a guest lecturer at other university classes, whether it was at conferences, etc. And I built that skill of speaking to people. And I absolutely put my own spin on it because it was the only place in academia that I didn't feel controlled, because none of those fuckers who are so conflict avoidant and indirect communication were going to go up there and stop me present. It would be taboo. So I would be silly and I would have memes and I would just nerd out on my stuff. And it always went well. People would frequently tell me, you're the only like interesting person giving a presentation here, because everybody else was doing like the monotone academic bad slide deck thing. So find your medium. So for some people, public speaking makes them, they'd literally rather die. Like that's actually something people have measured. For me, it wasn't, but I was so bored of the writing. You may hear that and be like, but aren't you writing a book? Yes, but while it will be full of hundreds of citations of research studies, it will be written how I want to write it. It'll be written in conversational English. And I'm self-publishing because having gone through the academic journal process and talking to people who have worked with book publishers, it doesn't sound to me like you get much out of it anymore. The book publishers don't do a lot of marketing for you. They get all the rewards and they pretty much control the narrative of the book. And this book is on my research that I have like ethical obligations to make sure is represented correctly. So I'm self-publishing the book. I do have an editor because I do want feedback, but I did not get a book deal. I am footing the bill on this. And part of that is I credit to, again, my spitefulness and my neurodivergence of like, I don't need the approval of the prestige of a publishing house. I have at this point worked with like 2 elite universities and worked in a Big 4 firm. And I've had good experiences and bad experiences, but the prestige was never what I thought it was going to be. And so I just don't see the purpose, frankly. Now, building connections, I attribute that to, I talk a lot about here on how working class people are very interdependent. While I have initially struggled with managing up, I have always been good at building my own army. I have always been the person who, and maybe it's because I was homeschooled, that I didn't see a lot of bullying until I was older and more secure in myself, that whenever I would go somewhere and like the kid was eating lunch by themselves, like I would absolutely invite them to eat with me. Like I'm just not, I don't like seeing one person ostracized. And so I have a habit of like actually developing my research assistants in undergrad, or they were in undergrad and I was in grad school, because I also knew what it was like to work in a lab that doesn't pay you and to only get a letter of recommendation and not any real development. And I didn't think that was fair. And that doesn't initially build your network. You don't see an immediate benefit to that. But I can tell you years later, like all of those RAs are still in my corner. They have connections that they reach out to for me and vice versa. Eventually, the people you mentor, you might end up reporting to them one day. You don't know. And so just continuing, even if you're not kissing the ass above you, just building your community and being a decent human being over time can help. And introduce people, connect people to other people. I struggle with being emotionally available myself, but I'm really good at connecting people to other people. If I meet someone who I know they have a shared interest with someone else, I'll send an email with them combined. And over time, you end up building a network and it helps. Now, how have I gotten on podcasts and things like that? I'm not on Facebook anymore, and I really don't want to promote Meta, but there were a lot of Facebook groups that I joined of people looking for podcasts, guests and speakers and such. So if you're on there, you can look for those. I'm sure there are others like on Reddit and stuff. At this point, I'm not in those groups because I deleted all my Meta, but I have enough social media presence now that people come to me. There are also, I'm sure there's also LinkedIn groups because I feel like I get a lot of LinkedIn messages as well. But initially, go and put yourself out there. I still struggle with self-promoting, and one thing I will add about the people you mentor is that when you give them the advice over and over again to self-promote and stand up for themselves, and I always say WWRWMD, what would a rich white man do? And then you don't do it yourself, your mentees will call you out on your bullshit. That has been my repeat experience. Like I have 3 good friends who I have been helping them throughout their careers for years now, because I was the only IO who does this research, right? And repeatedly, all of them, when it comes my turn that I need to do something, they're like, I know Dr. Anna Kay, who tells me that if I don't say it, somebody's white son will, is not self-promoting. And so they help me with that. That's the importance of community. And finally, I will say that social media the past year that I've really been using it for business has been an incredible self-development for me, because again, I didn't know the unwritten rules was going to make such an impact. I mean, that there would be interest, because in academia it was just continuously shut down. And hearing people's feedback and seeing the comments on what they're interested in and learning how to package what I already know in a way that's useful for other people is very helpful. And plus, with all the trolling, you get a really thick skin, because neurodivergent people literally feel things more. And so it can suck more. Let me tell you, a year later, it's honestly almost just mostly funny. I mean, some are really disturbing, but mostly it's just funny. And that makes, again, speaking and putting things out there into the world less scary, because you're like, there's nothing anybody's going to say to my face that somebody who hides behind a username and a fake profile picture hasn't already said to me. But full circle, and probably the longest video I've ever made on TikTok, at least. About 2 years ago, I finally applied what that first advisor told me, and I figured out what kind of life I wanted, like what I want my day-to-day to look like. And I've realized what really makes me happy and what doesn't. I hit the point where I was leading large teams and making a big salary and owned a home, and I was miserable. I had made it, and it was not what I wanted. And so, and it's not even that I work less, it's that I spend more time doing what I want. And I'm very clear with myself about what makes me happy and what doesn't. And through all this, a heaping dose of white doctor privilege certainly helps with making connections and people wanting to put your face on their podcast. If you have more questions, or if anybody else has other things that have worked for them, drop them in the comments. Let's share strategies.